I've heard a lot of people say, you know, we dealt with Ny'alotha in a 20-second cinematic. And it's like, but if you take the last 20 seconds of anything, it's 20 seconds long.
Yeah, that is I think exceptionally reductive, and I do agree with you there. I think to a certain degree though, like I agree more with like, because I'm let down. Like I am let down by the kind of lack of a more labored like prettier looking end cinematic with N'Zoth. And so I get that. I think some of that, at least for me, is coming from a place of people that do think that there's been a good build up to N'Zoth. I think there's been a great build up to N'Zoth, and the lack of a more meaty, chewy movie, and my disappointment of the lack of that comes from that build up, because I thought the build up was incredible.
I agree with you. And at the risk of like just bypassing all the other talk we're going to do about all the other cinematics, since we're here, I would agree with you. And I'd agree with you that I'm disappointed with the end cinematics of Ny'alotha, but for a different reason. And I'll tell you what that is. After I said this, I think that N'Zoth, with the exception of Sargeras, is the most intricately and satisfyingly built up baddie in World of Warcraft. Because that, you know, bypasses Warcraft 3 then quite intentionally. But like, I think in World of Warcraft, apart from Sargeras, who I would argue is better and more, I think N'Zoth is the best built up and most intricately built up and most thoughtfully built up, and over you know, a super long time, over multiple expansions. I think N'Zoth is the best built up baddie in WoW. And he's my favorite baddie in WoW. The old gods are my favorite antagonists in WoW. The Lovecraftian cosmic horror aesthetic is my favorite aesthetic in WoW. Ny'alotha is the place I've always wanted to go to in WoW. I would be quite happy if every expansion in WoW for the rest of time was set in the Black Empire. I'd be totally down with that. I would buy year-long subscriptions at a time. That'd be awesome. Count me in.
You'd have all
I don't care if it's just like
all the rat mounts. All the rat mounts to Taliesin.
I can't. Oh, dear goodness me, it would be amazing. And like, I don't care if it's just a different old god every expansion. Who's the main baddie? I don't care. Let's just do that. That'll be fine with me. And I speak as someone who's still wearing the Gift of N'Zoth. Even, do you know how many few people are wearing the Gift of N'Zoth? Because you can't transmog a helm, Garrett, when you've got the Gift of N'Zoth on. You can't do that. But I'm like, helm be damned. What helm could possibly be better than this Gift of N'Zoth? Nothing could. The answer is nothing. There is none more better. That's my answer to that. So, and I speak as someone who is like the biggest N'Zoth fanboy on Earth. I'm fine with the way N'Zoth died in Ny'alotha. I'm fine with the way we killed him. I don't mind. It's set up so he can come back if he wants. That's cool. As a kind of closing of the door on N'Zoth after all this time, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the in-game cutscene being shown, like my character shown to kind of like be the one who kills him. Although, of course, we all know that wouldn't happen because I'm, you know, a dedicated follower of N'Zoth and now a servant of N'Zoth. I've got the title as well, so it's unrealistic, but I like it. I like it as an in-game cutscene. It's fine. The pre-rendered thing with all the buildings falling down and stuff and the eyes exploding so they actually look like the heart of Azeroth, which I think was really clever and really good. I think that's really good too. My problem with it is, and I use this as a benchmark a lot, there was no Velen sigh. The best moment in World of Warcraft cinematics for me was Velen's sigh at the end of the Antorus cinematic, which, like, I think we're all eventually going to have to agree is the best raid ending expansion cinematic of all time. Certainly the best expansion ending raid cinematic ending of all time. Because the Burning Legion with this huge baddie that had been like the big baddie in WoW until Chronicle like told us, oh, actually the Void are bigger. And the story of like a baddie that had impacted Velen probably more than any other character in like in the lore, to be perfectly honest. And then to play through Legion, which saw Azeroth like taken over by the Burning Legion essentially, and then to go to Argus, his home planet, to take out, kill Jaden, his old best friend, to go back to his hometown, and like wipe out the Burning Legion there, to go into Antorus, his old kind of like, palace, and clear out the Burning Legion from there, and then to kind of like banish Sargeras from Azeroth to the other side of the cosmos, or wherever the Pantheon is now. And the way that it just focused on his face at the end there, and he just like sighs, he just closes his eyes and he just exhales. And it's like, you feel like he hadn't breathed a breath that easy for 10,000 years, And I thought it was so beautifully done and so awesome. And we just seen the Pantheon in game for the first time. We just fought a Titan in the Pantheon. We had died and been brought back to life by one of the Titans during that fight. We just seen a huge sword get put into our planet by Sargeras, who we'd seen for the first time in space. We were in a spaceship. But what they did was they brought it back to the personal. And they said, right, that was the cool stuff. That was the big stuff. But this is why it's important. It's important because it has this effect on an individual. And by proxy, us as well. Because, yeah, Velen is the one who is breathing out that sigh of relief, but he represents us as well. And there's no personal moment like that in the Ny'alotha cinematic, and that's why it fails. Not because for me, like, N'Zoth dies too easy, because I cannot wait. I cannot wait for all the people who say like N'Zoth dies too easy. I can't wait to hear what they say after 300 wipes on N'Zoth.
I mean that's game mechanic, right?
300 wipes on, yeah. But the thing is, like, to say that it's so easy, like N'Zoth died too easy. In lore, there is a 12 boss raid before that fight with N'Zoth. Like, the fight with N'Zoth is canon. It's a big fight that we have with N'Zoth. We don't just go there and zap him with the Heart of Azeroth. We have the fight leading up to it as well.
Right. Wikipedia, after this full read, N'Zoth was eventually vanquished by champions of Azeroth. And
of course the Mythic Journal, the Mythic phase that we haven't seen yet, which won't change anything. There won't be a Mythic cinematic or anything, but it's a big important fight. We had to fight our way through Ny'alotha. In the lore, we had to get a legendary cloak and level it up so we could even set foot in Ny'alotha without going insane. We'd spent the last year and a half like filling our Heart of Azeroth with the lifeblood of the planet, which is eventually how we killed N'Zoth in the first place. The idea that we've killed him quickly is kind of crazy, to be honest. Like there's been a lot of kind of work that our characters canonically have had to do to get to this point. So I've got no problem with the way he dies, but there's no personal hook. I feel like they thought we would get that with the in-game cutscene, and it didn't quite give it to us. So there's no equivalent of Velen's sigh, and there could have been, because like the story of Rathian in this raid is fascinating. The idea that his father and grandfather, Deathwing, was corrupted by N'Zoth and will forever be remembered as this huge baddie beforehand. N'Zoth has wrought millennia of pain and suffering on Rathian's family. Rathian's biggest fear as a character is succumbing to the whispers of N'Zoth, like his father and grandfather did. And the fact that it's him who leaps into the carapace with the dagger and clears the way for the characters to go and kill N'Zoth is massive. Like, Ny'alotha collapsing in on itself is as big a deal to Rathian as the end of the Burning Legion is to Velen. His biggest fear, his life's work is done.
It's funny because now listening to you talk about that, if anyone didn't have enough build up after listening to that, it's probably Rathian for me. Like, because he came on board pretty late in BFA's arc, right? And maybe that's probably where it's coming from for a lot of people, and it's certainly where I think probably a bit of my disappointment comes from is, maybe BFA tried to tell too many stories, to open up a whole new can of worms, right? Because like so much of it was focused on Sylvanas. very in very forward-facing ways, because of the Sourfang cinematic arc, which were not even in-game cinematics, for crying out loud. They really pulled out all the stops for those, and so maybe the N'alotha and the Rathian arc got a little buried.
Yeah, but I think part of that, I feel part of the reason that is the case is because they've only kind of admitted that N'alotha is the big baddie here too late. And again, I feel like that could have been solved by announcing with the expansion that N'alotha was the big baddie in this, because then you'd have an excuse to bring Rathian back a little bit earlier, because you're not trying to hide anything. You're not trying to surprise the player base at that point. There was a lot of kind of a feeling of, well, we can't tell you about the next patch yet because we don't want to spoil the surprise. It's like, spoil the surprise, just tell us, let's get excited about it. And therefore you could have had Rathian there a lot earlier. And I just feel like there's nothing wrong with the in-game cutscene ending Ny'alotha. There's nothing wrong with the pre-rendered thing of the towers falling down, but it's incredibly unsatisfying because there needed to be more. And for me, that the thing that needed to be more personal character stuff. So, I mean, imagine if while those towers were collapsing, you'd had a close-up of Rathian, and like you could see how much that meant to him. Like, he's free from like his biggest fear. Now he can concentrate on just being a guy or being a dragon and doing his thing. And like you could see the relief on his face, and that'd be awesome. You could see people who we've got models for who are featured in cinematics. You could see Anduin and Thrall in Orgrimmar and Stormwind, places that we are going into horrific visions for every week at the moment. You could see the corruption kind of and the vision kind of seep away from those places, and you could see like the reaction on their faces about that, and just seeing like the impact on the greater world and how the characters that we have spent the expansion with react to that. That's all it needs. And you've got a proper ending cinematic there.
Yeah. And that's the thing where like, I think like a lot of the conversation we wanted to have today was about how the expectations were set. And that's another factor about this is it feels it is insular. This is kind of just an ending. It's not a tee up for Shadowlands.
Yeah.
And for what I kind of look at as modern WoW, the end of raid cinematics have teed up the next expansions, starting with Warlords of Draenor. I mean, Gul'dan, although we probably didn't know it as much at the time, really thinking back on the way at the end of Hellfire Citadel, Gul'dan just being zapped away by Archimonde. We didn't really know where that was going.
No, but you did get a nice little moment between Khadgar and Yrel where everyone's celebrating and Yrel and Khadgar are just there, and Khadgar's looking very worried. And Yrel's like, you think they're coming back, don't you? And he's like, yeah, you better believe it, mate. So I'm off to prepare. You stay here and celebrate with the people that just tried to genocide you.
Yeah. So there again, there's that like subtle, but still a tee up to Legion. And then at the end of Legion, like Sargeras stabbing Azeroth is a direct setup for Battle for Azeroth. Yeah. Like as direct as it possibly could be. And
apart from anything, just super cool. Like it left its mark on the world. Like you completed the raid and you saw this cool thing happen in the cinematic. You saw Sargeras go, whoa! And then when you went to Silithus, that sword was there. Like the thing you'd done had an impact on the world, and the thing you'd seen happen in the cinematic had an instant impact in the world. Suddenly there was a sword there, which wasn't there before. And you'd seen that. And so there's no kind of link between the Ny'alotha cinematic and anything that you then see in the world, which isn't great either.
Right. Because you get out and it's like, all right, go fight in Uldum. There's some purple stuff you got to deal with because the that's how the game works. But what I'm trying to do is explain how I think this influenced our expectations. I'm not saying that is a bad thing. I think it's okay that N'Zoth's arc in Battle for Azeroth is rather self-contained, that it's an ending, and that with N'Zoth's death here at the end of this expansion, that it doesn't lead into Shadowlands. I don't think the end of every expansion has to lead into the next.
Oh, I don't think so either. I'm perfectly okay with that. I don't need to see like Rathian looking emotional about the towers falling down in Ny'alotha and then look over his shoulder and there's like just the echo of like the jailer or something behind him. Like no one needs that. That's fine. Like it's its own thing. But still, I think we could have had a better payoff from the fact that we've just gone into the sleeping city of Ny'alotha, the city of unnumbered terrible crimes. We've beaten the only ever released old god, and we just see some towers. The cinematic that it reminds me most of in end cinematic history is the final cinematic from Cataclysm, which has, I think, the equivalent of towers falling down. It has fireworks. I feel like fireworks and towers falling down are the most easy, boring, kind of cliche, kind of signs of victory that you can have.
Listen, as a fan of Star Wars, I am feeling personally attacked.
You know it's true. You know it's true. And Cataclysm does that. Cataclysm goes there. They beat Deathwing, and they're like, and even then though, they still have some character stuff with Thrall and, you know, little sort of soon-to-be baby Thrall and the dragon aspects, and they're like, the age of dragons is over, the age of men is here. So at least there's like some big character stuff happening there, some big changes in the lore of the game, which is happening. But the actual kind of celebrations bit is, it's just firework displays going off around the cities.
Yeah.
And it's proper, like, you have saved the princess Super Mario stuff. It's excellent. I mean, it's terrible. It's really, really bad.
And a flag rises up out of the maelstrom.
Yeah, the Ny'alotha cinematic only has the firework display. It doesn't have like any of the story stuff at all. So it's similar to the Cataclysm one, but it hasn't even got the good bits from the Cataclysm one. It's only got the firework display. You know,
right?
The towers falling,
and that's exactly the thing. So like since Wrath of the Lich King, we've had fairly meaty end of raid cinematics. Whether they teed up the next expansion or not, they were fairly meaty. And I just there is something I'm left wanting at the end of Ny'alotha, even though I haven't stepped foot in the damn raid yet, because this is how WoW works.
And this is the thing, this is how it switched, right? So
yes.
You didn't see the Lich King cinematic until you finished ICC. Now the vast majority, and neither did most people back then, but now the vast majority have seen the Ny'alotha ending cinematic. I would say probably about 99% at this point, probably more, haven't actually even set foot in the raid yet. So that's completely 100% 180'd. It's the complete opposite, the other end of the scale to the proportion of players that watch the cinematics that used to be. And of course that has a difference on how we consume it.
Oh, 100%. As I said much earlier, I think this is just, there's a lot of us that like lore. We have found each other through the internet. We want to talk about it, and it's going to be spoiled for us against our will if we don't just willingly consume it early.
Yes,
so
this is fact.
Here we find ourselves.
I would argue that it's not just lore nerds who have like a genuine interest in the raid cinematics, though, because like I make an in-depth lore video about Tyrande or something, and I expect only really people that are interested in lore to watch it. If you start talking about a raid ending cinematic, I feel like it has actually transcended just lore, and I feel like it's a genuine World of Warcraft event, akin to a new raid opening or something like that. I think it's something that a huge proportion of the player base is into, whether they're into lore or not. They all want to see that, you know?
Oh, which is why I mean, there's also the almost tabloid-esque, like, hot take, just give me as many controversial topics surrounding anything Blizzard makes as possible.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, totally. And you know, I mean, there are a lot of very kind of clickbaity videos going around about the massive player disappointment about the Ny'alotha raid. I mean, they're not wrong. It's the thing, you know, they're not wrong. And I've said this many times. I feel like creator culture it does a lot of good for a community in a game like WoW, but I think there are many ways in which it's incredibly unhealthy for a game as well. I think it's moments like this when we see that. And it's really interesting to watch and to kind of like consume. It's really interesting to me, and the amount of people who are comparing even Rathian kind of stabbing N'Zoth with the dagger to Arya Stark in Game of Thrones, as far as I can see, for no other reason than that they don't like Game of Thrones. and they don't like WoW. And that's kind of that's as far as I can get with that one. It's like
I could do an entire one of these episodes on BFA and the latter seasons of Game of Thrones. I could you could wind me up and let me go on that one.
Here's my take on it. I never understood the specific hate for season 8 of Game of Thrones, because season Thrones was shit since season 6, mate. Game of Thrones like jumped the shark and see the second that Jon Snow opened his eyes, that show was dead.
They should have leaned into the full anime ass nature of it from there on out, and they didn't. They just half measured it. For 3 seasons, and
no, the second his eyes opened, and I was getting tired with the whole premise before then. But the second his eyes opened, I was like, oh, this show's dead, and nothing in season 6 or 7 persuaded me otherwise. So people think I defend season 8. No, I think season 8 is terrible. I just don't understand why it's more terrible than season 6 or 7.
If you said that and they think you're defending it, I don't know. I don't know how they got that.
That's the thing. And that's the thing. I'm like, no, I think it's awful, but I think season 6 and 7 are just as awful. And that's me defending season 8 for some reason.
You're defending 8 by saying
that's not something that I feel about WoW. So I don't feel that's appropriate. But like, yeah, no, I mean, I get amazed when people single out a season which for me is just as bad as the 2 previous seasons for special criticism, when for me they're all shit. But anyway, that's my position on Game of Thrones.
I just look at latter seasons of Game of Thrones as something that were probably drastically affected by outside forces that were out of the creative control of a lot of the production team. And I look at BFAs and its challenges as probably involving very much the same thing. Outside forces outside of the control of the team that's actually making the product. I have that feeling with BFA.